All right, welcome to our Transformations Weekly podcast. This week we have a special guest with us. His name is Mike Reese, well known here in the community of Reading. But before we get started, I have a few announcements. Joshua Camacho is not with us this week. He had some things to do outside of Transformations today, so he took the day off and is going to spend it with his family. Another thing is that we want to send our condolences out to the families that work at Palmer, and prayers out to their families as well. Congratulations to Reading High for winning the district championships again in basketball. They're doing a great job, so congratulations to them. As always, anybody out there struggling, needing help, needing assistance in getting themselves started in a pathway to recovery, you can always reach out to me, Lee Cruz, 484-772-7079, or you can just send me a message on Facebook, and we will help direct you in the right direction to get you started on a pathway to recovery. You could always stop in at the Brooks Rise Center here in Reading on 8th and Oley. 8th and Oley, right? Yes. 8th and Oley. You can just walk in and ask to speak to one of their staff members here. So just come Monday through Friday. There's always somebody available until 4:30, I believe it is. And then, so we're going to get started here. Mike's a person in long-term recovery. He's been in recovery for a very long time, and he's been sharing his life experience through the community for a long time here in the Reading area, and Berks, right? Berks County. So I'm going to let Mike share a little bit of his background, live life experiences, and then we're going to touch on other topics on things that Mike does here in the community. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I guess we only have an hour left. Well, this is going to be difficult because I'm going to talk about my favorite subject, which is me in recovery, in the victory. So I'll just stay with the script.
Okay.
Since June 10th, 2002, I've been suspended in a state of grace by God, and for the last 20 years, I hadn't had a drink or a drug, and for that, I am truly grateful. My name is Mike. I'm in long-term recovery, and I appreciate this, Lee. And the suggestion is, when I tell my story, I tell you how it was, what happened, and how it is today. All right. So, I'm a proud Reading High Red Knight. So I heard that they won. That's outstanding because I'm the class of '73. That's when Stu Jackson and that squad went to the States. Yeah. It's 50 years ago. We have our class reunion in October.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, our 50 year. So I'm a proud Reading High Red Knight, and school was good for me. I was one of those egghead kind of kids. National Honor Society, chess club, student government. I didn't fool around with drugs or alcohol. And then that first drink happened on a school trip to Europe, actually. It was one of those things. I had an opportunity to go, and my dad signed the paper. I could drink, and that was it. I had one beer. Well, I had a bunch of beers, actually. But my first beer was in Germany, and, I didn't realize that I activated the addiction there. And, that's 1973, and frankly, after a series of consequences and changes, I went to college, dropped out of college, went to work, married, divorced, and now 20 years later, now it's the early 90s. And, I realized that this was not just a mere habit, drinking beer. And, some dry goods were on the table, but for me, I woke up, I wanted to drink beer. Not wine, not hard liquor, but beer. But it was daily. And if I didn't have the right amount, this would go on. It was shakes. So I knew that after 20 years of drinking, this was not a mere habit. And so I was a lot more mindful of all the advertisements. And in this time particularly, you certainly had the driving under the influence. Those consequences started to escalate, and for a very good reason. It's simply deadly to drink and drive. And really the first experience I had with recovery and treatment was because of driving under the influence. And so I got a break, and I did what was mandated by the law enforcement community, and went to outpatient for a few months. And that's where the seed was planted there. That was back in 2000. But I didn't get sober. I didn't surrender. And that's the key for me, that I needed to surrender to the fact that Mike's way wasn't working. You know, I would, just as those who are familiar with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, switch my brand, would drink only at home, only out, you know, all types of things, go to the gym, go to the therapy. Yeah, I just didn't want to surrender the fact that alcohol was no longer working after 20 years of drinking, and at some point very heavy. So the seed was planted, you know, that there is a disease called alcoholism, which is addiction by any other terms. But for me, it manifested itself in alcohol. So it was my job. I had a job here locally, and I was on the job 20 years. And you know, frankly, they were just tired of my absenteeism and other performance issues. But it really came up with absenteeism. I wouldn't show up for work. I would call off properly, but you know, the reason you have a job is because they actually need you on the job. It was very clear to me then, even more so today. And so I had an intervention on the job. You know, the choice was, you know, get help or get lost. And so I decided to get help. And I went to a local inpatient treatment facility for about 3 weeks, and yeah, that's where I entered recovery. You know, I didn't have to look back. I saw a lot of patients there, much younger than me. I got treatment when I was 46, so people half my age were already there struggling multiple times in treatment. You know, I had this one guy who was 27 years old. He was in a dozen different treatment facilities. And inpatient treatment was the best thing I've done in my life, and to follow those instructions. So, you know, I don't want to go back to treatment. You know, I mean, it was the best thing, but, you know, once is enough for me, you know, by the grace of God. And so after that treatment, you know, I guess they figured I was cured. like salami or bacon, you know, cured. But I was safe enough to go home and go back to the job and live in the community, and that's what I did. But immediately, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, another 12-step meetings, but particularly AA, and that was the recommendation. And there is where a new life for me began. You know, one day at a time. In the intensive outpatient I had for the following 8 weeks that I was discharged from the inpatient program was key to me. That continuum of care they talk about. The longer a patient is engaged in treatment, the numbers show the better odds are they'll stay in recovery. And that's my experience for the last 20 years. I'm still engaged. It's been said, I stay connected to be protected. So that's the key to me. I was with the technology. I was at a Zoom meeting, a Zoom AA meeting this morning before I came here. You know, just I got to remind myself, you know, like I'm not cured type of thing. So, you know, got a home group, immediately got into service with the intergroup and the district of AA. And automatically, by getting involved in service, I'm hanging out with the winners. People with multiple years of sobriety that are happy, laughing, giggling, joking. And, you know, that was really odd to me because at this point, I mean, I drank for 29 years. And, like, there wasn't a lot of laughter going on. You know, that's a lot of work, you know, to maintain that type of habit, and, you know, and that consumption. So, you know, the how it is today is, you know, from that point on, I surrendered and I followed directions, and my pathway is the 12 steps. So when I tell my story, I usually elaborate what I just said, but I always like to mention those 12 steps. You know, the step one is I'm powerless. That's the key. No matter what 12-step program, no matter what your addiction is, alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, the list goes on, of the types of addiction, is that I have to admit I'm powerless. That Mike cannot have alcohol on any day for any reason in any amount. And that means NyQuil. I need to read the label. You know, when I go out, I can go anywhere now. So I go out to a nice fancy dinner, a restaurant, event, conference, and they make that bananas Foster, and they put the rum in the pan, they hit it with the flame, and oh, that looks good. And those bananas. Now, I don't have any allergies. Oh, hey, I seafood, I want to eat it. I mean, it's just that simple. It's very, very easy. I'm on a seafood diet. So I got to watch it, because most of that alcohol burns off, but not all of it. And I don't get a little taste of, oh, well, even though rum wasn't it's like, well, hey, I like to make the feel, you know, this is not a good, it's not a good picture. It's not a pretty picture. So I need to watch drinking events. You know, last year, just a year ago, I was at an event, very nice house. I'm a volunteer board member. We're at the president's house. We had nice little hors d'oeuvres. And, you know, it's a Friday evening, it's 6, 7 o'clock. You know, it's not midnight. You know, it's like real respectable time. And my experience is when if I want a soda, I got to go to the bar. So I went to the bar, got a soda, and I removed myself from the bar, but I could still see the bar and the guests. And the idea was like, you know what? I'm just not feeling comfortable here. And it's not like I wanted to drink, but you know what? Do I have to be here? You know, it's like, no, I do not. It's just social. I said my hellos. I had my nibbles. I had my soda, and I bounced. Because I got to take care of Mike, because that's step one, I'm powerless. I don't need that rolling around in my head. You know, step two, that insanity. You know, I don't drink and drive anymore. I've been relieved of that. Step three, that willingness, the willingness to do the work in the action steps, particularly steps 4 through 9. You know, I took an inventory, step 4, and shared it with God and my sponsor when I was about a year sober, and that was a great relief. You know, there's a lot of baggage. You know, I was in my late 40s. Yeah, no one gets out of this world without some bumps and bruises. So to release some of that baggage was huge. 6 and 7, character defects and shortcomings, and you know, basically, Mike's a selfish, self-centered kind of guy. But just recently, someone put it this way: character defects is the trait. So let's say you're greedy. The shortcoming is I steal your wallet. Right, so there's a slight difference, but basically in the same category, you know, 6 and 7. I need to be very mindful that I'm selfish and self-centered, and I'll act on those ideas. You know, I'll isolate, I won't think about anyone else, and that's just not my best option. You know, it is an option, but it's not my best option. You know, steps 8 and 9, the making amends, making a list first, and 8, and being willing, and then step 9, making direct amends. I was about 2.5, 3 years sober, and this is a lifelong process, you know, because I still continue to be human and make mistakes. So I just remember, you know, the suggestion about, you know, 8 and 9 is, you know, maybe dividing that list. Those you're going to do right away, those you're going to maybe, and then maybe not. You know, just think about your funeral. Think about the people who will be at your funeral crying. Those are the people you got to go out and make the amends right away. And probably my most impactful amends, it was a husband and wife. I figure from the time this happened to the time I made the amends is about 5 years. So they were living in my head for 5 years rent-free. So I wrote them a letter and said, I regret my part. Their part is between them and their higher power. That's not my concern. My concern is my part. You know, we're at this meeting, we saw each other, we hugged, and it was over. 5 years living in my head rent-free. I'm free from the bondage of self. So this program of action works. You know, step 10, 11, 12. Some refer to these as the maintenance steps. Some refer to these as the growth steps. You know, step 10, I'm taking a daily inventory, and when I'm wrong, I promptly admit it. So much easier to, as soon as possible, say, man, my bad, man, I didn't mean it like that. And to hold on for someone for 5 years living in my head, that's craziness. You know, step 11 is prayer and meditation. And over these 20 years, you know, I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams. I'm living a second life during my first life. I mean, I say this all the time. It's like my driver's license is the same, but I'm a much different person. This is an inside job. And part of that is that step 11, that prayer and meditation every morning. And some mornings clearly are better than others, but I spend a half hour plus in prayer and meditation, trying to connect to my higher power. And if you want a good day, my experience, have a good morning. Start your day off right. And for me, prayer, meditation, my medications, and some breakfast, and, you know, start your day off right. You know, when I was drinking, you know, I would wake up or come to, and I'd be late, be rushing around, and it'd be chaos right from the beginning of the day. I don't live like that anymore. But some days are better than others, though. You know, some days I want to sleep in, I want to hit the snooze, and I want to sleep in. And step 12, I try to practice these principles in all my affairs. And hopefully I carried a little bit of message in maybe 15 minutes there or so. And you know, I can talk about what I do now, today. But that's my story. I'm sticking to it, Lee.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks. 3 things stuck out to me. When you started your recovery, you said that was how many years ago?
20. In June, it'll be 21.
21 years.
Yes, so 20 years will change.
As we know today, stigma is real. Like that holds a lot of people back from starting their recovery. How different is the stigma that is reality today to when you first started, and how does it differentiate people getting into recovery today? Because it's not as anonymous as it used to be.
Yes.
So if you want to elaborate on that.
Oh, yes. So my experience, you know, especially when I came in back in the early 2000s, there wasn't as much education about addiction, and there weren't as many resources like this beautiful Rice Center that we're here. So there weren't as many resources. You know, when I tell my story, I go back to that treatment center. I tell my stories. Some people, patients will ask, you know, like, how was it going back to work? And my experience is that the people who actually cared about me were happy to see I got treatment. All right? And one day at a time, as my comfortability increases, I can share my recovery story, or the fact that I'm in recovery. You know, so that's a part. You know, my experience is that those drinking buddies vaporized. Once they realized Mike wasn't drinking, he certainly wasn't buying any beer, and etc., that they disappeared. They had no use for me, and that's a good thing. You know, it was kind of like win-win, and you know, it was mutually. But the stigma, I think that from a person like myself in recovery, that I need to be realized, and this goes back to that intervention on my job, that one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing my story is that I was the only person in the room. My boss, their bosses, HR manager, and etc. were in that room. I was the only person in that room that did not realize the severity of my problem. And so those people who are even thinking about the stigma need to look in the mirror and say, hey, I got a problem. Other people know about it, but most people won't tell me because they think I'll blow up. You know, because I'm like a power cake. You know, don't talk to me about my drinking and drugging, blah, 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 blah. So once you get help, I think that the stigma will lessen. Now, I can't do anything about anyone else's thoughts.
That's right.
You know, and when I work in a hospital, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, there's still medical professionals that treat people with a substance use disorder less than someone with diabetes or high blood pressure or the like, other diseases that have relapses. So the stigma is getting better. Clearly, I think there's more education, there's more resources, and you know, I just think that people maybe are given opportunities to seek treatment, but I need to surrender. You know, and the Alcoholics Anonymous talks about it. Even fervor, you know, passionate pleas to stop drinking weren't going to help me. I had to surrender myself, and I had to go through the consequences. So, and everyone's different too. So my consequences perhaps weren't as bad as some others that I've seen, but I'm trying to compare. Mine were bad enough, so I just focus on Mike.
So one of the questions that always arise when people start their recovery, they always want to say, was it easy for you? And like, I'm right to the point. I tell them, no, it's not easy. So what would you tell somebody that is out there watching right now who's suffering and they're looking for something to just happen and just life changes for them and they just stop using? How would you answer that to them?
Well, this is how I would say it, Lee. I was inpatient for 3 weeks and then went for intensive outpatient. 3 times a week, I held on to that job. 3 times a week I worked, and then after work I went to intensive outpatient. And the therapist there said something I'll always remember. You know, living one day at a time. And this is a spiritual principle. You look at the Bible, it's all over that idea, that manna for one day. You know, it's all over the spiritual. Just live for today. Tomorrow, yesterday's gone. It's history. Tomorrow's the future. You're not guaranteed. Just live in today. So do not pick up today. No, it is not easy. Particularly if you think, like I did, it's July, I have 30 days, and I'm thinking about what am I going to do at Christmas? Well, no, it's not easy. But when I think that, you know what, today I woke up on time, I had a good breakfast, I prayed, I meditated, I had a good breakfast, I went to work or whatever my responsibilities are, you know, I'm not even thinking about using because my life is going good today. So, hardest thing I ever did in my life, maximum rewards. I mean, I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams. So, you know, if it was easy, everyone would do it. You know, that's how I would respond. But living one day at a time, saying, you know what, I'm going to surrender. And we say this regular, particularly with patients, you know, when I'm talking to people in rehab. Give it a year, one day at a time, give it a year. You can always go back to use it, you know, drinking and drugging. You always go back, right? But give it a year. Give your body a year, you know, but follow some directions. You know, once I surrender, whatever you say, pal, I'm doing. It's very easy. But up until that point, I wasn't taking any suggestions. And I think I see that too often when I work at the hospital.
One thing you said that I always tell people too, it's a lifelong process.
Yes.
People always tell me, how long do I got to do this work? And I'm like, well, how long are you planning to be around? Like, how long do you think you're going to live? Like, are you going to live till you're 70, 80? And they're like, at least 80. Well, if you're going to live to 80, that's how long you got to stay in recovery. That's how long you got to put in work because you got to do the work every single day, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be peaches and cream.
Right.
It's not always going to be easy because we're still going to get our daily problems, right? We have daily problems. we still have bills, we still got to go to work, we still got to do our thing, and we still got to be there to support our families. Our families want to see us do good, so we still got to do the work. So I love that you said that, and it's one of my favorite lines to my clients is, it's a lifelong process.
Lifelong process. Absolutely right. Absolutely. And when you say work, I mean, after a while, for me, it's not work. This is just a new, improved lifestyle. So if you think, oh, this is work forever, I'm sentenced to AA or whatever 12-step program or whatever path you choose, this is like a sentence. No, this is a gift. I need to reframe that. It's like, this is a gift. I'm enjoying practicing and living the steps. I'm not working them like I'm breaking concrete. You know, but I get it. You know, the first year or two, particularly a little difficult, you know, because my whole life was around drinking events. I mean, every group, you know, I volunteered for, or my buddies, I mean, there was always alcohol. You know, and so you know, now I can go anywhere. I can go to those events, but I need to be mindful that, you know what, I can get triggered here and have options. I don't have to do anything. So
I know you were talking about knowing when to leave places due to the environment around you. For me, when I came into recovery, I didn't go around any establishments that sold alcohol for 4 years. I was single for 4 years, and I stayed away from environments that sold alcohol for 4 years. And I remember I went to a training over at the old Crown Plaza when they used to do the Coca conferences.
yes,
And we went to eat in front of there was a Mexican restaurant. And I went there with the staff that were with me, and I'm sitting down at this table, and all of a sudden I see a waiter go by with drinks in his hand, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in an environment that has alcohol, I shouldn't be here. And they were like, Lee, like, you have to live in this world. So ever since that, you know, I started going out to eat, but alcohol's not on my mind. I go all over the United States when I used to ride my motorcycle, been to events where people drink, and I don't feel uncomfortable. I learned to live without having that obsession of worrying about the alcohol. Alcohol is not a worry in my life. I can, you know, go anybody's house, any event, and not even think about the alcohol. One thing I do think about is the food. I think about what am I going to eat? That's the most important thing for me. But yeah, so that stuck out. And, you know, again, you've been a mentor in my life since I came into recovery. I've seen you around forever, walking around with your many schedules that you put on the table when you go to the meetings.
I do.
And you've always been very inspirational. And
thank you.
You know, I've had the opportunity to work with you in different organizations, and, you know, worked with you side by side, and I admire all the work that you do. So now we're going to touch on the jobs that you do in the community, because I remember sharing a job with you where we were coworkers, and I didn't even know you worked there. And then you told me you worked there since they opened. So that was pretty awesome. So if you would like to share, because I always encourage people to go to the hospital, our viewers that are still using, and I always talk about the warm handoff program, and I tell them, ask for the warm handoff program. So if you could elaborate on the services that the warm handoff provides at the hospital for people that are coming in looking for help.
And I'll do that. Let me give you a little bit of background. So for me, I go back to being a chess club, Reading High, 73, in long-term recovery. I was sober not even a year. I got the opportunity to teach, coach, mentor youth in the Reading School District, the public library, the Olive Boys and Girls Club. And that's been since 2003. So I just celebrated 20 years of doing that type of coaching. With young people. I still held on to that job. I retired from that job after 30 years. That was the last day of 2011. So I've been retired since 2012, so I've been retired for 11 years. And since that time, I've been working with the Council of Chemical Abuse, which is the single county authority here in Berks, which a lot of this funding for that warm handoff program comes through from Harrisburg, through the council, through task to the hospital. And this is March, and this is Problem Gambling Awareness Month, and that's what brings me to Council of Chemical Abuse. So when I was working with the Council of Chemical Abuse, they continue to have trainings which you can use for your Certified Recovery Specialist certification. And I just renewed, I actually just got my certificate yesterday in the mail.
Nice.
So that's a requirement for working with the Warm Handoff program. The Warm Handoff program is a statewide program, and they have it in other states, but I'm just referring to Pennsylvania, that developed from the opioid crisis. It just became rampant, and as many people know, the OxyContin, the Percocets, got really out of hand, and the doctors, there was pushback, and now people are getting sick, and now the heroin became a lot more available and a lot cheaper. Higher quality, higher availability, less cost. Now we have this real problem with people using heroin and overdosing and dying because of too much, bad mixtures, and now we got fentanyl in it. Now I'm sure you'll talk about that. So we started this program. I was on call for a while. I would have calls sent to my cell phone, and I'd be at home and I would go over to the hospital. That lasted for about a year or so. Then I had to take a break because it really wasn't the best for my recovery. Because you get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, you go over to the hospital, and the person is gone, or they're resistant to treatment. So now, it's been since the beginning. I've been there May. It'll be 6 years. I've been at the Warm Handoff. That's when the program started. It's 24/7 at the Reading Hospital. Now, St. Joe's has a program that they're on call. So that's part of TASK, but it's not part of our operation. So I actually work for TASK as a contractor for the hospital, and we're in the hospital. We have an office. We're 24/7. We have a couple of gaps, midnight shift, sometimes someone calls off or, type of thing, but frankly, we are really a well-oiled machine. And the Council of Chemical Abuse and TASK and the Reading Hospital particularly have partnered together to put resources there. So whether you have no insurance or many folks have the state insurance, we look for the Burke CCBH. You get the Mara Health and other types of programs, but that Burke CCBH covers the mental health, the drug and alcohol piece. That's very good treatment insurance. So if you have no insurance, we got you. You got the state insurance, we got you. If you have commercial insurance, then we need to follow up on that first. Now, some of the, if you're working and you have Blue Cross and Blue Shield, that limits the treatment centers that will take that, and some of the treatment centers require a deductible up front. So, we'll get you in treatment, but it may be a little different path. 90% of patients I see about have either no insurance or the state insurance. So we got you. We have a dozen plus different providers. So anytime, any substance, alcohol, opiates, cocaine, we've seen a few mushrooms, methamphetamines is coming back. These combinations are coming back. You see people with a multiple substance use disorder. We come in to the emergency room 24/7. Go to the emergency room and, to be honest, say, hey, I just used, drank, I need treatment. Just be honest. And a doctor, the medical staff will evaluate you to make sure you're medically clear. So alcohol, I know it's a neck and neck race between alcohol and opiates. I still think alcohol is winning out a little bit. But alcohol is simply no joke. It's a poison. One who has alcohol use disorder can actually go into withdrawal, go into a seizure, a grand mal seizure, and die. Now, certainly, you go to a hospital, no one's dying on their watch. And often we see those with the alcohol use disorder being admitted into the hospital. And when they're admitted to the hospital, then the social worker and other resources are used. So we are only in the emergency room. So someone comes in going intoxicated or going through withdrawal from alcohol, they just used opiates, they're going through withdrawal, a few days, they're going through withdrawals, cocaine, different type of, issues with that, K2, we see a little bit of that, methamphetamines. If you're done, if you're ready to surrender, we can help you. Now I tell people, it's not hotels.com. It's not some place that you're homeless and you're looking for a bed for a night. I mean, that's not our design. We really want you to get help. So, but some people, abuse the system. I mean, that's just life. It's just people. They figure. I just had one guy the other day. He came in. He had 2 knapsacks full of his clothes because he was living under the bridge. Because he told my coworker that, and I said, we have a bed for you. Well, I want to go to a different place so people can bring clothes to me. And I frankly said, well, you got your clothes right here, right? I was like, well, I need clothes and cigarettes. I said, do you really want to have treatment? I went back to my office, got the treatment center on the phone to conduct a phone assessment, went back to his room. In minutes, he was gone. And so those are the frustrating things that we experienced, that, this guy was using opiates intravenously, he OD'd earlier in the week, now he's going through withdrawals now, but still did not want to stick and stay and get the help that we were more than eager to help. I'm eager to help. I tell people, you want treatment, you're going. If we can't find the bed, we're going to do everything possible to find a bed for you. Now, sometimes we do have a little challenge finding beds. We'll talk to the medical staff to hold people. They've held people, not only overnight, but a couple nights. If we're actively looking for a bed or this, that. But some of the patients that come in, it's not a very pretty picture. Asthma, diabetes, they don't take care of themselves. Drinking and drugging is a higher priority. High blood pressure, unchecked diabetes, unchecked asthma, high blood pressure, all these mental health. Oh, please, if you have any, people say, oh, I'm depressed. That is a mental health condition. Something that needs to be checked, because if your mental health isn't medicated and checked, drinking and drugging is a very viable option. We see it all the time. We don't always know what came first, the chicken or the egg, mental health or the drug addiction, but often they're on board. That someone has depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, schizophrenia. We ask the same questions to everyone, so I see this all the time. And we ask, what kind of medications you're on? Well, I haven't been on the medication or blah, 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 blah. Well, when we're out there using, we're not good time managers. We're not good stewards of the time. So for those mental health medications, you must go to a specialized provider. And you can't go to CVS and pick them up off the counter. You have to have a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, to re-up those psych meds. And they must reevaluate on a regular basis, because they're not passing those out like candy.
Right. So
we got you. The commercial insurance, is probably our most challenged, because people, if you will, have a higher bottom. They're working, or their spouse works, and they usually have some family support because they have a commercial insurance from themselves or a family member. Sometimes the deductible can be a challenge, but we can work around that with COCA funding if we have to. But we must exhaust the person's current insurance.
Right,
So,
right.
If they, I had one patient, they went $4,000 deductible up front. Well, a couple treatment centers won't even talk. If you can't put that on a credit card or something, they won't even talk to you.
Right.
A couple will put you on a budget terms available. So we have to exhaust all options. I mean, you can't do something here, this or that. Then maybe we can go to the COCA funding for at least a detox type of thing for a short-term stay.
Thank you, Mike. And so now, when it comes to transitional living and the environment that they start their recovery in, how important is that?
Well, I go back to the idea of being connected in treatment, the continuum of care. So someone goes to treatment. My experience and suggestion is to follow the guidance of your treating professionals. The whole idea of being in recovery, the individual, this is my experience, this is the education I got, post-acute withdrawal symptoms could happen for up to 24 months, for 2 years. So the first year or so, for sure, you're not thinking right, And they say insanity doesn't return 3 to 5 years. I mean, I drank alcohol heavy for 29 years. I did some damage. To think that's going to be overturned in a few days or a few months is just unrealistic. So if they say sober living, whatever that halfway house sober living, 3/4 house, whatever that suggestion is, that is what we would strongly suggest. Since I had my own house and a job, I was directed to intensive outpatient, which was very helpful because they made it very clear: go to meetings, get a sponsor, be active in service, and live one day at a time. That higher power, of course, is part of that. But they really stressed those parts of living in life differently. So I didn't have the experience of recovery house because I own my own home.
Right.
So, but that doesn't mean that some people own their own home, but then they have the third or the fourth DUI, and they're saying, listen, it's not working. Maybe going home isn't the best option. Maybe you need to be in a more structured environment, even though you think that you're the bomb and I got my own house, I don't need it. So following the direction from your treatment professionals, I think, is key. And everyone is different. Right. And every recovery house is different. But if you go to a recovery house with, I know you're familiar with Camp Joy and Easy Does It and the YMCA programs, they're all structured for a good reason. Curfews, random urine screens, mandatory minimums, 12-step meetings and the like, outpatient therapy, and etc.
And the sober environment is the key.
Right.
Just to be around people who are sober and work in a program of recovery. And you can utilize the people in that environment to stay sober, to do sober activities together.
Yes, good point.
Because if they do choose to go home after treatment, they're putting themselves back in the same environment. Just because they're in recovery, not everybody around them is. So it's easier to just follow along or follow suit with what's going on in that environment. So that's why transitional living is very important for a lot of people to get themselves involved with. I was blessed. I was able to have been in one of the YMCA programs when it was around, the DUI Stop 2 program. And that was a blessing in my life, because if I would have went back home after that, if I wouldn't have went to transitional living and learned those basic life skills and went back to high school, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I can't make things up of what I think I could have been, but it sure wouldn't be where I'm at today.
There you go.
So I had to change everything, the people, places, and things. The first 3 things you learn in recovery, I had to change all that. So I'm glad that you touched on all that, Mike. So the last thing, and another thing that you advocate for, is gambling. You want to elaborate on that?
Yes. So when I retired from my full-time job, my strategy, I'm a bachelor, no children, so I'm unsupervised. So it's very important for me to stay active. I'm not going to retire and then sit around in the house watching Judge Judy all day. That's not a good fit. So my strategy is to work part-time, volunteer part-time, and most days, Lee, I get that afternoon nap. So that's been working pretty well for the last 11 years. And so I retired 1 week, and the next week I started with the Council on Chemical Abuse, the single county authority here in Berks County. All the drug, alcohol, tobacco, gambling money that comes from Harrisburg comes through the council here in Berks County. So they were looking for someone part-time. And I'll leave this with you, maybe hang this up. This is the Stop Gambling. If you need help, 1-800-GAMBLER. And the reason that I'm so passionate about the gambling is, one, Pennsylvania, as you may know, legalized gambling. And part of that legislation is a allotment from the casinos for treatment, education, and prevention. So I'm part of the prevention and education component. If you or someone in your family has someone with a problem gambling addiction, they can get treatment, and the state will pay for it. Now, their own insurance comes first, but if there's no coverage of your own insurance, the gambler can get treatment and the family can get treatment because of this nest egg, if you will, from the casinos. That was written in the law. So part of, so I tell people I'm doing casinos are paying for me, which they are through the Council of Chemical Abuse. Gambling, a few years back, was put in the same category as alcohol, even though gambling is not a substance. It fires up the same parts of the brain, the dopamine and all those endorphins and all that. And when they do those brain scans, those people like me, I needed to drink more to get the same effect. When I didn't have it, I had withdrawals the same way as gambling. And the increased amounts, increased law enforcement, exposure, problems with family, all those things mirror each other, even though gambling isn't alcohol. They're in the same category in the DSM-5. And so it's a treatable addiction. There's Gambling Anonymous meetings here in Berks County. And, we have March is Problem Gambling Awareness Month. So now we're at the end of March. We, especially pre-COVID, we had a conference every March. We were on Zoom for a couple of years, but I was just at a conference in Philadelphia. They had great professional presenters representing different communities. They had those representing the Asian and the Pacific community. They had those representing the veterans community. They had professional speakers, and those representing the LGBTQ plus communities. Right. And the different challenges and why these gambling addiction is appealing to those populations. The veterans, for example, for the veterans out in the room, that was the first gambling treatment center was under veterans. Now, they used to have gambling on United States base, but I understand that was short-lived. But they have slot machines all over the world. They don't have any on any U.S. bases. So it could be a big problem. You have folks in the military that get paid and have a lot of time on their hands, and they have the slot machines right next to the bar. 1-2 combo. So you'll see a lot of veterans struggle with gambling. And gambling and alcohol and tobacco, a lot of them are co-occurring. So see a lot of smokers gamble, particularly. There's a high number of smokers gamble. And the fact is, a high number of gamblers commit suicide, twice as many in the population for those in addiction, and several times higher than the population in general. So twice as many. So if you have an alcohol use disorder, but you're a gambler, you're twice as likely to commit suicide. So that's incredible numbers. If you're under 25 and gamble, you're twice as likely to have a problem. And if you use alcohol, you double it again. So those young people who use alcohol and gambling are twice as likely to run into a problem. So that's what my education has I've learned. And so we're rolling out a new program, gambling and gaming. And young people, they not think about this gaming business. They're buying the skins and the loot box, but that's big money. The gambler industry conditioning you to know every time you pull the slot machine or press the button, I guess now, for the slot machine, you know you're not going to win every time. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows that, right? But you know that some people win. Some people win big. Mm-hmm. So you're willing to take the chance. And you're conditioning that. So that loot box, that whole idea in the gaming, they're all related. And they're, young age Chuck E. Cheese, I guess, is a good example. You get all those coupons to buy the little Army Man or whatever. You go to the shore, and you have these arcades at the beach, right? Some of which actually are discontinued machines from casinos. They put them in arcades and all that kind of stuff. So, I'll leave some of this for you, maybe the audience, the different 20 questions. This is the South Oaks test. Did you ever lose time from work due to gambling? Has gambling ever made your life unhappy? Does gambling affect your reputation? There's 20 questions here. These are highly, readily available questions. But if someone is ever thinking about gambling, if it's a problem, if you're thinking about gambling a problem, you probably have a problem. But there's the lie bet. Mm-hmm. Did you ever lie about your gambling? And did you ever bet any more than you planned? So if you went into and said you had $50 to gamble, that was entertainment. And that's what gambling is. It's designed for recreation. So instead of going to the ball game, you go out gambling. Mm-hmm. Or instead of going out for dinner and a movie, you go out gambling. That's your recreation. You choose to do that, you're grown. Right? Well, did you ever lie about how much time, how much money, or did you bet more than you planned to? If you have yes to either one of those questions, now it's time to look at the 20 questions.
Or both.
Right. Either one or both. Right. Exactly.
So, like with the gambling, they have that on the phones now. You can just easily download the app and.
Absolutely. So when I started back in 12, sports betting and phone online was just in its infant stage. Mm-hmm. New Jersey had it first. But you had to be in New Jersey to bet online. So you didn't have to go to the casino floor. Mm-hmm. But now, it's like, many states, including Pennsylvania, you can gamble on your phone. Mm-hmm. And they're more than happy to set you up with an account and guarantee your first $100 or whatever. You lose it, you get credit right back to that credit card that you signed up there. And, the Pennsylvania State Lottery and other avenues in sports.
Got big with football.
Right. And it's not limited to win or loss. It's in play. So who's going to make the next first down? Who's going to score again? Mm-hmm. How many tackles? I mean, it's just unlimited. Yeah. In play, you can play. During the game's going on. So it's incredible.
Well, thank you for all that information, Mike. Do you do any of these? Do you have any support groups in the community on gambling?
I understand there's one Gamblers Anonymous meeting out in Temple. I don't have that, but the 1-800-GAMBLER, that would be, they can tell you, there's Zoom. I use intherooms.com. Now they have all kinds of 12-step meetings. They have men's meetings, women's meetings, AA meetings, NA meetings, Al-Anon meetings, Gamblers Anonymous meetings. They're all on Zoom. But face-to-face meetings, there's a church in Temple. I believe it's Tuesday and Sunday. Mm-hmm. They have it in Temple, but I just don't have that in front of me.
Well, Mike, thank you for all of the great information you gave us here today. One thing I do want to talk about is the fentanyl and Narcan kits that Transformations has been handing out. Thank you to the Council on Chemical Abuse for supplying us with the Narcan kits. And in the Narcan kits, we're also making available the fentanyl testers that comes with instructions in Spanish and in English. That way you are able to test your drugs to make sure there is no fentanyl in it. And you live another day and make a decision on when you can start recovery, because we would like to meet people right where they're at. And when you get these kits, you'll get some information on the local organizations that can help get you started on your recovery, such as the Berks Rise Center, TASK, and all these other nonprofit organizations or organizations that are here to help guide you along your pathway in recovery. Again, Mike, thank you again for coming in. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak and share your lived life experience, and all the work that you do here in Berks County. We appreciate it all.
Thank you.
You're definitely a man that keeps it moving.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you, Lee.
Yeah. So again, see you guys all next week, and we'll be here with Joshua Camacho and myself. And again, if you need to reach out, my number is 484-772-7079. Have a blessed week.